We are currently live. What's going on, everyone? We are back with another live stream. So I kind of tried to make this promise a couple weeks ago, and so far I've been keeping it. So I won't keep the promise in perpetuity, but for the short interim, I'm trying to stick to the idea of doing a weekly live stream of some kind of knowledge session. And so I've been reaching out to people for some of the ones in the future. So be on the lookout for those. But I reached out to Matt here, and I met Matt a couple months ago, actually, and we've been kind of staying connected ever since. Super knowledgeable. And he agreed to come on for like a Vercel Next.js kind of live stream knowledge share where we can share some things that obviously people are curious, wondering about, talking about. But the other side is maybe some clearing up some misconceptions on some things. And I kind of brought up one that we'll dive into in a minute. But I think this is a misconception with a lot of developers, especially at like the enterprise level. And I figured this could be a way to kind of dispel some of those and maybe educate others. I see some people already jumping in the chat. What's going on, Richard? Thanks for coming through. Very frequent chatter there. But let's kind of dive into it. I guess before we dive into anything, Matt, why don't you introduce yourself for people at home that may not necessarily be familiar with who you are?
For sure. Thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate this. Hey, folks. Matt Jared here. I am a sales engineer at Vercel. So what that means is it's my job to help customers connect the dots and how they want to use Next and Vercel on the technical side and make sure that it's like a really great fit for their business and making sure that everything is going really well for their use case. So for me personally, I come from a developer background, and before I was a developer, I was very much not a developer. So I think Danny and I have a lot in common on this. I started my career in marketing, and similar to Danny, I didn't have like a epiphany as much as Danny did. It was kind of like a slow kind of roll into the learn to code phase. And I left Cincinnati, which is where I'm from, and I moved to Austin. So I'm right down the road from Danny, still in Austin today, and went down the learn to code path. I wanted to work with startups and I wanted to learn how to code. So spent a lot of time outside of whatever it was I was doing, trying to get into web development and learn these things. Somehow 13 years have passed and a lot has changed. While I was learning how to become a developer and enter in this world, I, worked a lot in the startup scene in the Austin startup world. And then I, led into some contracting work. I worked at a company called the Zebra for almost 4 years. I was the sixth engineer when I started, the 60th when I left, and then I worked at Atlassian for a while as well. So I was there for almost 5 years. And all of that time, I was always reaching for front-end web development problems to solve. That slowly bled into doing a lot more back-end stuff and more full-stack things and all sorts of things. But mostly, I've spent a lot of my career in this front-end world, and this is where at Vercel, this is where all of this kind of like points back to my whole kind of career. Which is helping folks build awesome web applications and things like that. And this is what we're here for at Vercel is to, help folks make amazing stuff. And Danny, you guys do a bunch of Vercel work as you've got some Vercel sites up for some of your customers and clients, and you do some Next stuff. And I think we have a lot of parallels on that side as well, too, for the learn to code world as well.
Yeah, I will say this.labs is a Next.js expert, Vercel expert. That's kind of like where our wheelhouse is for a large portion of our client work. So if anybody needs help there, more than happy to have that conversation. Kind of diving into that, there have been some things that have come out very recently, actually, in the world of Vercel and Next.js.
Mhm.
And we've covered some of it, but there are quite a few people that still are not aware of it. Maybe we can dive into one. Very recently, Fluid Compute came out.
Mhm.
And we have seen some very, very favorable things happen for some of our clients that we've instituted with. Do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit? I know I can geek out about that for a bit, but
Yeah.
maybe you can give your side of it.
Yeah, so I would say fluid compute and all, I'm trying to find the blog here that I can drop in. Fluid compute is kind of the next generation. Let me see if I can join the chat. We're going live. So I'm going to join in and drop some stuff in here. So um, fluid compute is sort of the next generation of the serverless platform that we have at Vercel. So Vercel, if you look back in time, was started as the absolute best and easiest place to deploy a Next.js or a React application. Sorry. So this is before Next.js Vercel started to solve the deployment of React applications. Along the way, that we found that I say we, but it was the team that preceded me that built, the large part of the product. That there was more required for applications than just client-side rendering. And when you say client-side rendering, that means like the page loads, JavaScript loads, and then the JavaScript like what's called hydrates the page and makes the page look great. Um, And a part of that is instead of having a long running server that's going to run on there, we at Vercel, we attached really close to the serverless architecture. And that doesn't mean that there's no server and it's just like a tree that we like tap into outside of everyone's house. And like, it's not a natural resource or something like that, right? Like it's an actual server, but you don't manage the server. You just manage the function that runs on that server. And this is where like kind of the tenets of Next.js sort of like sit on top of as well. So you're going to have your front end, which is in React, all the latest and greatest of React, and then your back end is going to be on this like on the serverless platform. So it's going to be like Node on serverless. So you'll be able to run very Node-like applications in serverless. And this is where this was like really our bread and butter for a long time to kind of build things out as the company grew and as our use cases changed. What comes with that is you're able to have different rendering strategies. So you can render on a server, you can render on the client and the server, you can render on the server once and then change some things, or render on the client once and change some things, or render on both and do lots of different interesting things. But then that kind of led into different questions because more and more use cases were coming from AI, where there was longer IO, so there's longer input output. Lots of different workloads are starting to get pushed into this server and on the back end. So then React has gotten really good. React has now moved a little bit to the server. The serverless has kind of gotten to the point where it's really good. We've solved some of the cold boot issues. But one of the things that we found is that there was a little bit of chance for us to optimize the threads of a serverless function. So when a serverless function runs to begin with, what happens is it opens up a thread that runs that function, right? And that initial thread that opens up just runs. And there's some visualizations that we can open up here in a minute. That thread opens up, and that's where like all of like the computation occurs, and that's where your serverless function runs. And what our team did was, instead of just having many, many, many different threads running where they just ran forever, what we did is we had a thread open up, and then on the back half of that thread, before it was killed and deleted, because the serverless function just runs and then dies. So it's kind of like a bug, right? Like it runs and then dies immediately. So what we did was we tacked on ensuing requests. So those ensuing requests are running faster, and they're running in one single thread, and you're only being charged for where your one single thread is running from. So basically it was just kind of collapsed the platform into folks being able to have multiple threads run multiple invocations rather than a whole giant list of invocations. And there's a really good visualization when we go through some of this. We can look at that. But the idea is fluid compute essentially brings like the best of serverless and the best of a server, like a traditional server, together. And the idea is you don't have to do anything to instrument this, right? You just click a button in your Vercel platform, and then we just take care of all that heavy lifting for you. And the idea is it should be more cost effective. It should be more performant. It's going to be just as secure as the rest of the Vercel platform. It's going to be really easy to just kind of like get these amazing benefits and be able to just like hop right into this whole world, and nothing really changes about your existing like day-to-day workflow.
Okay. And so one other aspect that we were just talking about recently, and I figured we can kind of do something live if you're up for it.
Of course.
V0 has been a big talk right now. I've been geeking out about it. I actually just was having a conversation very, very recently with a director of a household name brand, and they were talking about how they're seeing all these other tools like Bolt New, Replit, V0, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they don't necessarily understand how that they're going to utilize it at their level. And I see this other aspect with a lot of developers, even at one of my last meetups, mind you, in Dallas, where we were talking about it, and they're like, well, you just kind of throw something up there. This is going to be the tool that the non-technical are using to kind of throw something up there to kind of solve themselves, right? What is it that you see from your aspect that developers that maybe work on teams could end up utilizing this for that they're not seeing? Because even me, there's some clouded areas that I don't see as well.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to address a comment really quick. The thread is continuously running. The thread does not continuously run. The thread opens and then closes. So like there'll be a thread that does eventually close. So like it opens, it takes whatever, it maximizes the use in that thread, and then it'll close. I have a demo that's sitting around. I asked somebody on my team for the link, and I'll show this when I start demoing stuff here in a second. So you can actually see how it works. And then I'll share it around for the team. Okay, for V0. So V0 is one of our newer products, a startup within a startup. What's amazing about V0 is that it helps you prototype and build a full stack web application with just English, with just prompts. So like when you're looking at ChatGPT, what you're saying is like, here's an English prompt, and I say like, how many spots does a giraffe have? And it'll tell me all about giraffe spots, or tell me about like airplane history, whatever it is, like limitless knowledge, right? It's all at your fingertips. The thing that we've done with V0 is we want that like knowledge of the web development platform that we at Vercel have applied to your English prompt, like the prompt that you're going to put in. So we want to say like, build me a web application that does something really cool. And this is kind of like the very early days of V0. And this is amazing for an LLM because what V0 does is it leans on Next.js. Right. So we're going to build any Next.js application, which again, like we talked about a second ago, that's going to be a React application under the hood. It's going to give me the best tooling that I possibly can for a React application. And I'm going to be able to drop in server logic. I'm going to be able to do things on a server, right, through our serverless platform. So I have those two things working with each other. And then the other side of that is, how do I style this and how do I design this? And what we've done is and this is perfect for an LLM, is we actually use Tailwind for this. So here's where Tailwind comes in. And this is great for an LLM because it's just going to predict the next like set of classes that gets added on. So Tailwind is just a ton of classes, right? It doesn't have to go find and create a new CSS file. It doesn't have to name classes. It doesn't have to name elements. It doesn't really have to do anything. It just like writes a bunch of these Tailwind classes. So this is one level where it's really, really useful, is like, I don't have to write CSS. I love CSS myself. I would write it all day if I could. I'm not everybody has that same opinion, but
not
like
me.
that's so that's one kind of opinion that we've brought, is like, okay, everyone, let's just start with Tailwind. It's going to be very easy, very performant. All the extra Tailwind classes that you don't need are going to get extracted away because that just gets deleted at build time. So when you go through Tailwind and you go and it's guessing the next word, there's also kind of a big question of like, well, how does this actually work on Tailwind? Like, it could just hallucinate a bunch of crazy stuff and my site's going to look horrible. The next layer that we did is we used this UI toolkit, which is effectively the new Bootstrap, or the new kind of like de facto design system, is called ShadCN. And it's a very basic set of tools that come on top of Tailwind. So like, now we can see where this is going. Is like, we have like the primitive, and then like all of the best opinions. So the primitive for the React to Next is like, here's what React is the primitive. On top of that is Next, where it's going to get really, really, be really smart and have like different ideas on how to do things. We're going to feed that into the LLM. And then on the design side, we're going to have Tailwind, which is going to be our primitive. And then on top of that, we're going to put ShadCN. And that's going to give us like our design kind of guidelines for what we're going to do. And this is like the basic part of it. And then the next part of that is, we're going to show this to you in the browser. And we're going to show you how to build this yourself. Where it gets interesting, and Danny, I can see where folks are like, yeah, you just do this once and then you run away from it. Where it gets interesting is that what we see, folks, is a long-term play of like, I'm using this all the time in my application with Vercel. So like, sure, you can do it once and you use V0 for like a page that you make. But where it gets really useful is when you like, okay, I have like a component that I'm going to make, and I'm going to make a new header, and I'm going to take this new header and I'm going to like design it in V0, and I'm going to make it really amazing and intricate, and I can use all the different tools in V0. We'll go over that in a second. But the key is, now what I want to do is pull this out of V0 and drop it into Vercel, because Vercel is going to give me the tools to go build and like do all these different things. And we'll kind of demo that here in a second as well. And the idea is, wow, like I'm now going in and out of V0 to Vercel. And instead of going to like a design system or being an expert of this or having to hire someone else who maybe like to bring somebody else into my team or these things, like what I can do is say like, okay, I'm going to collaborate with someone to go build something really, really quickly. Or like, okay, I know that I have all of this time to go build an application. Half of it is spent on stuff that I don't like, which is design. Or the opposite is, I'm a backend developer. All of this time is spent on like, I just don't like front end. And I'm giving an example here. Like, I don't like front end, and I just don't want to deal with it. I have all my backend stuff. Just give me something that looks cool. And the idea is like the consistent input into V0, drop that into Vercel, then pull that out of Vercel as you go and you make different elements and components and stuff like that. Have you guys used V0 at all, Danny? How's that looking on your side?
We're 1000% experimenting. We've created like a demo with it to show one potential client that maybe end up utilizing it. But that's like where my current level of exposure is. I work now. I will say I am very heavy on the back end of things. I do a lot of front end stuff, don't get me wrong, but back end is definitely like where my passion is with a lot of development.
Right. Like we're coming from the opposite direction.
Yeah, you're like, I could write CSS all day, and like to me that's a nightmare. There's no way I'd want to write CSS all day. And so for me, a lot of like I do love solving problems. I love the logical approach. But I can do anything on the front end. I do a lot of
Hmm.
front end heavy lifting and work as well. So don't get me wrong, but it's definitely
Hmm.
not where I find the joy of things, which is also the reason why I've really loved AI in general, because
Hmm.
a lot of the things that I don't like doing on the front end, they can solve the problems for. Like, for example, one task that I gave it the other day was um, there was a lot of values that were hard coded, and I was like, hey, it would be great if we just had labels for all of these things. Can you create labels for all the hard coded values? AI
Hmm.
is doing all that where I can still focus on the logic, and like stuff like that is where I really geek out. And to be honest, that's kind of the reason why I've loved this whole aspect of V0 and these other tools, because it's like, okay, I don't necessarily have to worry too much about the things that I don't enjoy as far as development goes, and I can have that kind of solve a lot of those things. But I'm kind
Hmm.
of interested to see what other use cases there are that maybe I haven't even touched on.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the cool part, and a lot of this. There's a lot of recent changes that have come on. We have a whole marketplace around V0. So for
Okay.
me, like I don't necessarily know a ton about databases. I know how to use Supabase, and I know I want to reach for Supabase. What you can do is have V0 actually just go straight connect straight to Supabase for you, and like build your CRUD application. So for like, give me like the connective tissue between like my Next.js application and Supabase, and for you, Danny, like you might be really interested in like the system design, and you might take like, I'm going to take like 2 days to think of this system design. I'm going to whiteboard all the different pieces, and I have all this different stuff. But like writing out the types for how I'm going to go put all this in is not a great use of my time, right? Like putting in like the connective tissue for the environment variables and how it's actually just going to show up in an open field on Next.js for you is not as exciting as it is for me. And I'm busy today. So like you just do it in V0 is how that would look. So there's parts of where like there's different vectors by which people are coming into this, and like where you want to lean onto it is really up to you. And it's like for me, I like the front end and I like the designy stuff. So like I spend more time prompting and designing and maybe tweaking some code on the visual side. But for
Mhm.
you, it might be like the middle layer of like, okay, I don't necessarily really care how like React does like form validation. I just need to know that this is a number, and the thing after this is an email address, and the thing after that's a phone number. And then you're doing like, the beautiful mind thing that you do on the back end of like, here's the system and how it's going to work, that AI will never, is not doing right now. And this is where you are an expert and you know what the customer wants from this case. And that's what I think is really the most exciting part is like, I'm not an expert in this, but like I am going to be able to deploy a full thing where like just
Mm.
2 people can go build something that 20 people 5, 6, 7 years ago would be able to do, right? Like the amount of people and time and energy it takes to get something to market is so much faster than it was not that long ago. And V0, I think, is like one of these amazing wedges for folks to just like get in the door. Like you can learn web development. It took me, like I said, 13 years to get to where I am now. And I would say like I'm okay. I'm not an expert at some like code things. Whereas like it might take you 13 months to get through some of these, given working with V0, not just having them write the code for you, but having it like as a tool for you along the way. To like, if you get stuck, you have someone there over your shoulder who can help you. And in this case, it's not a someone, it's a prompt. It's an English prompt. Like, hey, I have this problem and I'm going to drop it in, and V0 will show me what to do.
This is an interesting take, because you've said something like it's like the speed to go to market will be increased. But is that the only use case that we're thinking about here? Because I mean, right now that's where my mind is. Like, okay,
Hmm.
if I have a brand new project, I'll tap into one of these tools here. But what happens when I need to maintain this like over the long
Hmm.
term? Like, is this a use case for this, or is this like, hey, you probably want to use something else for that?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think this is the idea where it's like that's like one of the huge steps forward. Like, because I can go do things really quickly. And what's really exciting about V0, and this is different than some of the other tools that you might reach for. They're all great. Use whatever you want. Like for me, V0 is perfect because what I want to do is I always want to reach for next. And what I want to do after that on the other side is what I want to do is sorry, I'm getting distracted by this question.
I was
Oh,
about to
sorry.
say, is this the
Okay.
beginning
So,
of the Danny and Matt podcast? Like, is that what we're
yeah.
about to
Well, here,
do this?
we'll make a homepage for this on V0. So the
Okay.
idea is one of the first steps is speed, right? So here's like the speed for me, like grabbing things, and I'm going to be able to get stuff done. I'm always likely going to reach for next. I'll stretch myself in other times when I want to do things, but like since we're going to go start a podcast today, what I'm going to reach for is something I'm comfortable with, right? Like this is a quote from this book, Atomic Habits. It's like we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our habits, or to the level of our systems. So like my system is always reaching for Next.js because I know it. I'm an expert at it. I might want to reach for Astro or for Remix or something like that, but I just don't know it as well as I know Next. So I'm just gonna reach for something I know. And then the idea is I'm going to go now oscillate between my Next.js and Vercel, and then like go build new features inside of V0 and bring that back into Vercel. And then Vercel is going to be able to kind of launch me into the world on that side. That's a little bit different from some of the other tools. So like Bolt is going to build you like a stack blitz. So like if you're really interested and you really like stack blitz for deploying stuff, if you really like that and that's kind of where you live, that's where Bolt is going to take you to. And that's where they specialize, right? That's what they do. The other side of this is for Lovable is going to take you into their kind of ecosystem. If you go to the other side of this and you're looking at like the cursors and you're looking at like what's the other one, Windsurf, Codium, and Copilot on GitHub, those are going to be where I do some of like the more kind of like manual labor work. So like for the example earlier for Danny, like when you're building out like the system design, you don't want to like remember all these names for me, right? Like this is where AI will kind of like help me with this. So depending on where you want to go reach for things, this is where it's like, it's not about the whole complete tool chain. It's about where it's going to like catapult you to the next level. And that might make you faster. That might make your work like less buggy. That might make your team like easier to understand what's going on if you're on a distributed team. It might make it easier for me to hire someone to go build stuff for me because I know their output will be a V0 site. That might make it easier for me to figure different things out along the way. But the idea is we're using AI as a catapult to the next thing. And the next thing for me is going to be from V0 into Vercel and Next. And then when I come back for my next round of changes, that catapult is still going to shoot me into Vercel in a very easy way. And for folks on the call, like your catapult might be something else. Like your catapult might be, a Python application, or your catapult might be some mobile app. For us and our customers, and where we really want to focus is take like Next.js and Vercel and make it really easy for me to live in this world, build amazing designs, and then hop right into Vercel and make really great websites and deploy from there.
All right, let's try and start building this thing out and see
site.
how this goes.
Let's make a site. Okay, cool. Let me see if I can figure out how to share. Present. Can I figure this out? Share screen?
You will present, and then once I see the screen here, I'll bring it to the stage.
Okay, let me make sure I like minimize out of everything besides my editor. And like let's see what I can come up with. Share screen. Allow window, entire screen. Awesome. You guys probably have like a million pages that you can see. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, we're out of there now. So you guys should see fluid0.vercel.app.
Yeah, and can you press the hide button on the bottom?
Yeah, hide this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can type that here. Awesome. Okay, so we talked about Fluid Computer. I want to go back to this, and what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about we're going to make Matt and Danny's podcast site here in a second.
You want to like zoom in a little bit because it's kind of small.
It's probably a little too far. Okay, cool.
There you
go. Okay, great. So what I'm looking at here is I've been on this site for 507 milliseconds, right? And if this site were to be running on a server, this server has to always be on, really, no matter what, right? It has to just like sit and run. No matter what's going on, there has to be something there. And a lot of times there's a ton of automation behind the scenes that's going to hold it, like keep all of this organized for us. But a lot of times we're also going to need people who are inside of there. And we're going to need experts, right? It's not just people. We're going to need like DevOps, SRE experts who come in and like hang out in this area here. So this is the first side of this. And I'm actually just going to remove Fluid. So this is the first side of this is where the server sits here and it's always on, right? When I go to serverless, nothing's happened, right? I haven't done a request. So, and in this case, just to set everybody's mental model, the request is going to be something like, signing up for an email form or changing my address. Typical kind of like HTTP status code of 200 is going to happen on the other side of this. Like I'm going to do something and then a positive response will come back is the mental model that we have here. So send request is I'm going to send a request of my email address to sign up for Matt and Danny's podcast, right? So I'm going to send this request, right? So all of what's happened while this, and I mentioned threads before. So this is what that thread is that thread that came through for that serverless. Let's do it again here. Took me 3 seconds. This like darker gray box opened up, and then the green kind of slider thing was the actual data being transferred to whatever end service it is, and then pulling that data back. right? At Vercel, we call ourselves, a front-end cloud. So what we do is we interact with whatever backend you want through various rendering methodologies and through Next.js. Is we'll just use this serverless function to go, talk to Salesforce or talk to CRM of your choice, put in that email address, and then send it back, right? So here, and then send back the response, and then the response will say, "Hey, good job, you've done this." It's a very very good looking thing. But this is like simple, right? Like this is me just like, okay, here's one person at a time. What we want is to really crank, right? And I'm clicking this a bunch. I don't think you can see, but like I'm clicking this a ton. And you can see here at the bottom, the server is hitting this point where it needs to scale out, right? So that it costs money to do that scaling for those machines. You have to know when it's going to scale. You kind of have to keep an eye on it, and people are oftentimes going to be there all the time, keeping an eye on what's going on. Or you just kind of get alerted when it's down and you go fix it, right? Like that's the traditional way of doing it. What serverless does is it composes, runs, and then dies, right? Like I say, it's like a bug. Like it has a 24-hour life cycle for a bug. In this case, the bug's probably a bad term. I mean, like a fly. Serverless is like a bug. That's not what I'm saying. Serverless is like a thing that like lives very briefly and then immediately dies when its job is done, right? So like imagine like the life cycle of a bee is that it lives to like pollinate a flower, and then it's goes back to the home nest, and then eventually it dies very quickly, right? Like serverless runs and then dies. So let's do this again. The problem with serverless here is that first initial request, it needs to be really optimized if nothing's going on, because that's where the cold start problem comes in. So a lot of people will say like, oh, serverless has cold starts, that's why I'd rather run a server. But we're at 690 milliseconds while I'm running this, and serverless is not really run at all. So what we've done to start with on Fluid is we've eliminated that cold start problem. So this is where we have bytecode caching. So that cold start problem has nearly been completely eliminated with Fluid as the first part of this. And then you'll see when I go to send a bunch of requests, instead of a bunch of like serverless requests in these threads piling up, what we'll do is we'll take on, and I'll kill server here to make this a little more clear. What we're going to do is a thread that's been opened up, we're going to attach on ensuing threads to take advantage of cost savings and performance savings on how those are running through. So as long as I'm running these through, and as long as a bunch of requests are happening, instead of individual threads that come up and die, what we do is we attach on a couple other things inside of that. So let's kill serverless now. And you can see with Fluid, instead of just one request taking up one thread and it lives and dies, what happens is with Fluid is we have one thread that lives, and then other small requests that come through that inside of that. And you can see here, like the usage of this is going to be much lower than in a traditional serverless. So go ahead and take a look at this fluid0.vercel.app. Okay, Danny, we have other stuff we're talking about though, because we're starting a podcast.
Apparently people are liking it. The different experiences of both Matt Jarrett and Dan Thompson makes this a beautiful conversation. I'm loving it.
Great.
I didn't know this was going to happen.
Yeah, we're going for it. We're going to start something new. And this is the beauty of it, is like we found like this market for content, and like I know I want to go build this podcast now, right? Like and this is one of the things that's great about Vercel is I can create at the moment of inspiration. At V0 is like I can totally like build a complete business out of at the moment of inspiration. So what I want to do is inside of this box here, and I'm going to close this sidebar. This is just like the sidebar when you get oriented. It's like your past projects. Kind of checking in on things, change, like you can look at the community, there's different projects and resources. But for what we're going to do to start is we're just going to use like plain English, and we're going to build a site. I can upload from Figma, I can do uploading a project, whatever it is, but I can clone a screenshot. But what I really want to do is just like make me an awesome podcast homepage and player for Danny and Matt's tech podcast. Okay, this is just English. I'm not like doing anything crazy. I don't like, there's no inside baseball that I'm like saying here. I just want to make a podcast page like for my new podcast. And again, what's going on here is V0 is scanning through, and it's saying word by word, it's figuring out what should happen next, right? This is how LLMs work, is they use what's called a transformer beneath the hood to go through and figure out and wait on what the next word and what the next character should be. So it's seeing awesome podcast, homepage, and Danny and Matt, and then it's kind of just like running from here. And where it's running from here is what it's doing is it's using that same technology to sort of like know what the next character should be. And that next character, in our case, is it's writing a bunch of code for us. So it's writing a bunch of code, and it's writing React code here. So you can see this episode card. You can see like all of like the tabs content. This is all stuff that's coming from ShadCN. So it knows based on the training data, it says like, hey, ShadCN is the underlying design system here. And I mentioned earlier where when I was talking about like Tailwind CSS, this is really good for an LLM because it doesn't have to go like write a bunch of classes. Like what it's doing is basically just saying like, here's the next. It doesn't have to write a bunch of classes in terms of like making a name for an element and then going off to like a separate CSS file and then comparing the two. What it's going to do is just write classes that give design inside of the HTML here. So this is like Tailwind in V0, like a perfect match here. Okay, so you can see what's going on here on the side is, and I mentioned this a second ago, what Bolt does is they build you a stack blitz. So if you like stack blitz, that's great. That's where it goes. But in our case, what this is going to do is build us this like a code app, like an application over here in the sidebar. And it's going to build all these different things for me, right? It's going to build all these different, when I say things, what I mean is, oh, that's actually pretty sweet. What it's going to do is, let me go back to the code. What it's going to do is it's going to build me a full application here on the side. So it's going to show me like all of my hooks for how I'm using mobile. It's going to give me a bunch of like data. And this is actually really cool. So these are like AI generated pages or like album art essentially that just came through. But then up here, the code side, it's going to give me a Next.js application. And then inside of that application, it's going to give me the sub components for how this is going to work. Okay. So let me go back to preview and I can see here, like, this is pretty cool. We built like a podcast player. What's really neat is it's actually also optimized for Next.js. So I don't know if you guys caught this. When I was scrolling, it actually it uses the best of Next.js for performance. So like, I don't need to know how to use Next image to get this to work. So like to get the image, like lazy loading to work. And then you can kind of see like, it's just kind of like pops down through here. So I think this is going to work. No, it doesn't work. There's no audio that it created.
I was gonna say we haven't recorded our first episode yet, man.
That would be amazing. Like I thought would give us like an audio like snippet to use. This is really easy to set up. You just drop like in Next.js, what you would do is you would just drop in like an audio file into here. We have folks who run their own podcast platform and stuff like that. So it's going to give me these tabs. Really interesting stuff. What I can do beyond this is I can say like, make this extremely cool looking. And I can go and say like, I want this to be a lot cooler, like make it pop is the type of thing. Make this extremely cool looking so I can get the really, so our audience knows we're very sleek and fun. So what's going to happen is I'm going to pop this in here and I'm going to hit enter. And instead of rewriting everything, what we're going to see here is that V0 is actually like looking at this. It's saying, here's all the things that I'm doing. It's reasoning through how all of this is going to work. It's figuring out like what the next step should be in all the different pieces. And now it's actually flipping back over and it's going to just take the pieces that it's changing and change those pieces. It's not going to rewrite the whole entire application. So our follow-on experiences should be a lot faster. And once this preview kind of wraps up, we'll be able to kind of see how that looks. And what's cool is I can just continue to work on this and keep dialing in. What's interesting about this is I'm using this for a full application, and we'll get this deployed to Vercel here in a second and kind of walk through that. But if I were to come from, some other application and I just wanted a header, or I just wanted a contact form, or I just wanted a small piece, that's really, really useful because I don't have to start from scratch every time. And with V0, what we can do is we can actually do smaller componentry too. So this is the idea of the first step is, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just about to ask, I was like, even you're giving these prompts for changes, it's making very big, large changes. So how does that work on a smaller scale? Like, hey, I need to tweak this one file. Do you now find yourself in a situation where it's tweaked it in 7 different places to where you're like, oh, dang, now I got to go back and make adjustments?
Yeah, and that's the idea of get it into what I like to recommend to folks is get it into Vercel as quick as possible. So, and we can just kind of jump to that here. So I can deploy this to Vercel here, right? So I can just confirm and deploy. And this is going to basically make us like a regular site. So imagine this is very, very similar to, and it just deployed from the first iteration here. Imagine that this is going to be from like, we just want to build this, right? Like this is the new kind of a replacement or a complement to Wix or Squarespace, where it's like, I just want something up and running and I want to get it deployed. But we're a development team, right? Like we know how to go and build this. So what I'm going to do is I can actually like go ahead and send this into Vercel here. I can drop any environment variables. I can send it into GitHub. I can build integrations. Like I'm working with Vercel inside of here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop this into my project. Let's see. So this is now, oh, this is, excuse me, I got this screwed up. This is a V0 project is where I connected it to here. But if I want to go to my Vercel, here's where I pop into Vercel. And there's also V0 projects as well. So to address your question, Danny, so like what you can do for projects is all of this designing of these elements, I can also do in a V0 project. So I can have like my let's say we have like our player as a part of our project that's in there once, and I want to reference it in another like iteration, or I want to change it to another thing over time. Here's where in V0 the concept of projects comes in, and this is where I can spend more time in V0. But like what we want to do for our thing is like you want to design like an amazing backend for this, or you want to make it like really really cool for that purpose. And this is where the idea of going beyond prototyping and going like starting with a prototype, get it into Vercel, get going on actually building this, and then scope it down to the different pieces that you want to change, and then lean on Vercel for this kind of process. So what I'm going to do is connect to GitHub here. This should let me connect something. And what it'll do, the reason why I'm doing this is because I need to create a new, let's go back here. Sorry, I need to connect this to GitHub, and I'm going to create a repository for this. Sorry, I missed this step. Because what I'm going to do is create a repository, and it's going to take all this code I generated and take it to where I'm going to work, right? And I can go now do this. The idea is what I want to do is get this into my editor, get this into my world of doing stuff. And then I can actually like now iterate on it, and then I can then bring it back into V0 and start working. So this is on GitHub. This should, oh, I need to sign in. This is probably, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. I need to sign into GitHub on this. So, but really quick, let me actually just pull this down. You don't actually need to spend a ton of time in GitHub to do any of this. It's just like the source of truth is going to be a Git repository sometimes. So if you use Bitbucket or GitLab, whatever it might be. So I'm going to do CD into projects. I'm going to git clone into our new homepage. And here's an example, is like I use Cursor as my editor nowadays. Like in addition to V0, I have a code editor that's going to help me write like cleaner functions on this side, right? Or whatever it might be. So it's going to help me kind of like move faster. Let me pop open a new terminal. And then I'm going to npm install. And I'm going to go and pop this open. And we can see all of our application that was just written. So like our episode card, our podcast player, like I just kind of want to manage this as a developer. If I don't want to manage it, if I don't want to deal with it, then what I'll do is I'll just deploy this off and into Vercel. This is where how I'll do that on this side from V0. You can just deploy from here. Sorry, we're going like live stream inside baseball. So my flow is a little bit disjointed. I'm not logged into GitHub. So you can see here, I'm logged in, and then I'm going to do pn run dev. And now what we're doing is I'm in software developer mode, and you can see I can use Cursor, I can use VS Code, whatever it might be. I'm going to open up a new terminal here to see where we are in my other terminals. There we go. So what we can do on this side is I can actually like build this in my browser and see what this looks like. So if I'm going from initial idea to now working on it, I'm going to be able to see the different pieces. Okay, so here's the future of AI. And again, like we want to do like some crazy backend that is really complex and really difficult. This is where I'll pull down into my editor and start working on this. Let's say I want to like really like V0, like I really just want the layout done. And then I really love messing with colors. Or like, I don't know, name your thing that you want to do. You don't have to be in V0 the whole entire time. So like, here's where I'll do like Danny and Matt's Awesome Tech Podcast. And I come back over to my local host, and this is already up and running. Next step of this is now, like I'm talking about, like, how do I actually see this in action and turn this into like, how do I monitor my traffic? How do I look at fluid compute? How do I do all these different things? And here's where, what I'm going to do is just commit this straight to main. So I have this little alias here that allows me to get add, get commit, and get push. And then the get, you'll like this, Danny. I actually just have a random NBA player as my commit message. This just sends it up and into GitHub, and that way I don't have to think of a commit message, and it just sends someone's name in there. So what I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to hop into Vercel. Let's see if this actually goes, which Vercel this went into. Let's pop into here and see where this went. This should be right here. Let's actually just add a new project. In this case, I probably created a new project. There's a reason why this was jammed up is because I didn't have the permissions to send it to the right thing. But in this case, let's just create a new project, and I'll just make our new. I'll import from here. In a normal case, when you're doing this, the reason why this didn't work in my case is because I tried to send my V0 project to a project in Vercel that I don't have rights to create a new project for. So in this case, we'll just do a little duplicative work, just so you guys can actually see how to work in Vercel too. So what's going on when I deploy something to Vercel? This is a little bit more kind of like first principles. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to have my product name, and then I'm going to have my framework preset. It infers based on my project how to get deployed and how to go up and into the world. So if you're using Astro or you're using, some other front end framework, whatever it might be, we're just going to automatically detect that. And then we're going to build the infrastructure on the other side. So that site's just really, really fast based on what you're writing your code in and how you're building your site. So I'll go ahead and deploy this here. And this should take like 30 seconds. Danny, how's this feel for you? Anything that we're missing? Anything we need to change?
No, I'm going to throw a curveball in a second just to see how it handles it. But
Yeah.
I am curious. So basically, we've used V0 to build the beginning aspect of what this application is. Then we pull
Mhm.
it down locally, and then the developers would work on it. So then at this point, would V0 now, I guess, by default, be out of the equation? Or would we not be referencing it
Now,
or using it anymore?
so here's where what we can do is we can stay with our initial chat. We can go and mess around with our projects, and our projects can go be crazier. Or what I can do is I can go back to V0. And once this just got deployed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm inside of Vercel. What Vercel's done, this is great because we now have a site for this. I wanted to have this in Vercel because I want control over this and I want to be able to kind of manage this going forward. So I have this Vercel URL. So we have our own awesome thing. But let's say I want to make this like player app really cool. What I'll do, and in this case, is I can actually just like take a screenshot of this. Or what I can do is I can actually take the code. So I can actually go to my, let's see, episode card podcast player. So like I can take this podcast player and all of this, I can copy this code, and I can drop it into V0 again. And I'll go back to V0 and I'll start the process over again. Where did my V0 go? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say like this podcast player. And what I can do is take in a screenshot, or what I can do is I can actually remove this and like what's a cool podcast company, like Syntax FM.
Hmm.
So these guys have like a cool podcast. So we'll go to Syntax FM, and I'll say like, let me go back to this, like make me a cool podcast audio player that looks like Syntax FM. And what I've done is I started with V0 for like really big stuff, and now I can like scope down. And then since I'm scoping down, I have a place for this to go, and I'm inside of Vercel working on this. And this is me as a developer. I can do all of this in V0 natively and never touch a code editor too. I'm just doing this because I like to, we want to have control over a thing, and I want to know how it works inside of Vercel. And here's where you can actually kind of see, like, I'm digging in a little bit closer. And this might, like, V0 might start broad, and I can say, actually, no, I just want the player, and I can go further and further. It looks like it's getting closer here. The idea is I'm going back and forth between the two, and then I have other AI tools that I can use. So if you're using Bolt.new or you're using Lovable or whatever it is, like you can start in those places and then drop it into Vercel too. The idea is that ultimately, since I want to have control over where the code is forever, and I just want to know where it is, I'm going to dump it into Vercel and use Vercel as my kind of like source of truth. But you can also use V0 as your source of truth, and go and do this kind of flow as well. What I like about this is, go ahead, Danny.
I was gonna say, do you think as we're doing this, like, is part of this potentially like a mindset shift on what V0 is? Because the way that we're using it here is the way that I would imagine somebody use like Chat GPT. But
Mhm.
like the big difference here is, with ChatGPT, when it's generating code, it may be a snippet, it may be this small little thing, but here it's like it's generating it all in almost like an editor-like view where I can kind of go
Mhm.
through it. And this has always
Yeah.
been like the thing that I've always had a pain point previously with GitHub, where GitHub would just show you like the files and you have to go through, but it never felt like it was in an editor until recently they started making changes. Is this kind of like the idea around it? It's like ChatGPT with a repo that you can go through?
Yeah, pretty much. And I would say, like, in the end result is that it's very easy to take it into Vercel. It's built for Vercel. It's very easy to take it to Vercel. And that's the kind of like the end thing that this is for me personally, I get really excited about. Somebody else might just want to keep it inside of V0. So it's like, yeah. So like, for example, I just clicked this button up here, and what it's saying is remove. I'm just going to remove that part of this. So I'm just going to remove like this element here. But I also, what I could do, so let's let this run through. What it's going to do is it's rewriting this code to just like take that element away. And this is like I can do like point and click type of work. And to your point, a second ago, it's like I can also just like go in and write some code and change it. So let's see. So here's where the preview should come back here in a second. And it's going to show me just like my podcast player. But if I just want to mess around with what I think, I just took that's interesting. It just took the picture away. So that's a great point. So like, all I want is literally this player. I don't want the whole site, right? So this is to be expected, right? Because V0 is going to look at it as like, I'm going to make you a whole page and then your sub elements, but it's our job to like kind of say, like, okay, we don't want this. We just want the sub elements. So in this case, what I'm going to do is like, that's gone, that's been removed. Let me go to podcast player and let's see, let's just remove all this stuff. And what I can do is actually just collapse this just like an editor. And I don't want any of this. This is the main content area. Okay, cool. This is one thing. And then this is the audio player. And then let's just remove these comments just for fun. And then I don't want the min H to be screen. I just want it to be like this. And I don't actually want this to be sticky. I don't want it to be bottom. I'm just going to go like this. And then I can actually just go ahead and hit save. And then when I hit save, I'm now editing this inside of here. And let me go back to preview. And it looks like, let's see if this is actually going to preview. But the idea is what I'm going to do is be able to run this and my previews are going to work. Oh, this actually, I don't think I actually deleted all this anyway. So like, here's where I can actually like go through and start like messing around with things. And then now I can actually say like, okay, here's my skip forward, my skip back. I can mess around with this. Or what I can do in the preview mode is I can say like, only show the audio component. And now I'm up and running and I'm cooking. One thing about this is these pieces down here is there's cook mode, and I can attach images where it's like, just make me this element and things like that. There's just so much that you can do. You can sit in here and play around. And your point, Danny, is like where I want to play is that I can actually like look at the console to see if any logs come through and to see like how stuff's going to work. And then instead of like, maybe say like, okay, this is close enough. I want to take this down to my editor. Okay, this is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. So I'm going to do is I want this podcast player and I'm just going to copy this. And then I'm going to take this over to my code. If you're not a developer, you don't have to do this. But since I really want to know how this works, I'm literally just going to go ahead and copy paste this. It looks like this is broken, but here's the key is like, I don't have to do all of just one AI thing. Like now I'm in export default podcast player. It looks like the name of this is wrong. So let's start all over again. Let me do this for just a second. It did this a second ago and I deleted it. So podcast player is what it's called. And then I'm going to do, did you see this thing that just showed up right here? This was cursor that was telling me that like to pause to do things. So instead of export default, I just said like podcast player, right? It's like, teach me how to do this. What am I doing wrong? So here's where like combining the AI tools is going to be really useful. So I can say inside of here, since I'm using cursor or I'm using, whatever it might be, Copilot or Codium, or that's called Windsurf, I can actually just say like, it's going to write some code for me here too. So I'm not just, it's not a zero-sum thing. I'm using many different things. And here's an example, like this is broken and expected to import podcast player. It's probably like a naming
I think it's
thing
on your page.tsx. It's expecting the previous name.
Yeah, expecting this. Okay, yeah, so here, let's see. Is it going to fix it? Import, yeah, let's see how it works. Podcast player, podcast player, export default function. So stuff like this, I can go fix right away, and I now have this up and running. Is this podcast player? What happened in here? Is it in here? Podcast player, something happened. Probably a prompt import, and I don't have a title actually.
Yeah.
And this is the new, or whatever the prompt is. So you can see like it's gonna like not be perfect, but the key is I now don't have to write all of this other stuff, and I can just fiddle around with this and find it. Okay, I need to import podcast player. Great. Figure out what the actual answer is and go from there. And you can see, I think that this actually worked. I'm on localhost. Here's our new thing. Like I didn't really have to think. I wasn't even really paying attention. I was just kind of like hoping that it figured it out, and it did. And now I have, a different podcast player here. Were you going to say something, Andy? Sorry, I can't see you.
No. I was gonna correct what you did in cursor, but it ended up fixing it.
It fixed it. Yeah. So this is like perfect, right? So the key here is now I'm up and running. And this is, again, it's choose your own adventure. But for me personally, I want to have my output from V0 inside of here. And what here is Vercel, right? What I can see inside of Vercel is I have my deployments. This was just our original deployment that we did. What we can do is we can set up analytics. This is just a little package that we have. This is a first-party package that I can enable, and what this will do is it'll allow me to essentially say, what's my traffic look like? What is my like events look like? So maybe we want to do an event for like clicking the play button. So like every time somebody clicks the play button, I want to know what they've done. And I can actually set an event up for this. Since this is brand new, I have to enable this. I have to import a package. It's very easy to get this up and running. Speed insights is the other thing. Like if we're wanting to go and like figure out how performant the site is, this also is available straight away in Vercel. Yeah, this is really cool. Yeah. So let's install these. Let's see how fast we can do this. I was using PNPM. Let's go to our thing over here. And this is the beauty of it, is like I can go do all of this in like V0 is going to get me started. It's going to be my catapult into Vercel, and I'm going to be able to do stuff. And then I can go back to V0. I can say, hey, here's our site that we're working on, guys. Go make a bunch of experiments for this. And then let me import analytics. This should be really fast. I'll go into layout. I'll drop this here. And then cursor should know. Yeah, cursor's going to import this for me. So web analytics, I actually have to redeploy this. And since I'm in Vercel, all I need to do to redeploy is to commit. So I'm just going to commit this. And then this should, once we get some traffic, this should start coming in here. What's cool about Speed Insights is that this is going to give me like real data. Let's actually pop over it. We're going to break the rules a little bit for you guys. I'm going to go look at the Speed Insights for like the Next.js site, because Next.js has a ton of traffic, and you can actually see like we map back on this product to the core web vitals. So like the first contentful paint, largest contentful paint, like time to first byte. This is crazy. You can actually kind of see like how fast it is. You can see it on desktop and mobile. You can see on the different pages. And this comes like right out of the box. Like you just have to turn it on. So instead of having to like build a spreadsheet and like guess which pages are fast, or like wait till somebody tells you that your site's slow, like it's all built for you right here.
We have a question that came in from the chat.
Yes, sir.
This is a wonderful demo. I agree. Is it possible to have your updates on GitHub synced or pull to your session with V0?
Git integration is in flight. So this is something that is being worked on right now. That's the like I made an update to V0, it goes into Vercel, and then it shoots back. Like they go back and forth. Like we just did this update right now. So imagine when we just added analytics. Imagine instead of doing that update, what we did was we changed it to be, instead of black, let's just do BG, what's purple 900, whatever it is. Imagine we did this. But I want that to show up in V0 now, right? That's in flight. That's not here yet. That's something the team's working on behind the scenes. So the idea is what you would want to do to keep up with that is to keep your Vercel application up and running, and then start with like a screenshot, or use like a project and keep that project up to date. So that will be in the next couple, however long, that will show up. So that way it's like everything stays in between. So like if somebody makes a change in V0, it should show up on this Vercel site as well, this Vercel page.
And what if so I think his question is more geared towards, let's say you or your team, you're working on something, you push those changes to GitHub specifically. Is it possible for V0 to pull those changes into the context of the conversation?
Not yet. And I think that's where it's, not yet. Not quite yet, to where it's like something's in GitHub and then it comes down into V0 to pull that context. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Yes, not yet. But that's on, like, we're very aware of that workflow. And this is where I think there's keep tuned in for more updates on stuff like this. Cause I think that's a very common request.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was talking to like another tool, and it seems like now context within the code base is like the biggest thing people are looking for. So it's not like it's like a blank request with nothing underneath there. I know there's a couple tools that claim it, but even then it's not perfect. And so I think that's kind of where I
Mhm.
think maybe the future of all these tools are going to eventually go to. But then my question ends up becoming, if it develops this context and it puts this context into the question of the parameter itself, the call becomes so large. How do
Mhm.
you justify the cost, or like what does the cost end up being when it considers the entire code base around that? It seems like that
Mhm.
would be a very expensive call each and every time.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on LLMs underneath the hood too, because it's like the interesting thing is there's so many tools on top of the tools that you can use, and I think that's what V0's done that's really interesting in terms of performance. Is if you hop back over to, I'm getting confused on where I am. So you saw like when we were like regenerating some of this code, we didn't regenerate all the code. We just regenerated
Mhm.
some of the code. And it's like, how do you follow along like the diffing of those things? We have a little bit that you can see here in like the show diff.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's really interesting to see. It's like how much of this, and what if, I guess one of the questions that's to be determined by really anyone that I've seen is like, what happens if I send something into one of these tools that has a bug? And this is actually what's really neat about V0 is it also, I've been doing a lot of screenshot examples, but you can actually do like code examples where you can actually just like run through that. So like, I think it's going to be a world where there's a lot of extra kind of like one, help to get started really quickly, and two, it's going to be a lot more secure. So like it's like, where's the bug in this code that I've written? And then like V0 will be able to help that. Same with Cursor, like same with a lot of these tools is being able to like build stuff that doesn't have like security flaws in it and things like that. On the V0 side, we take extra care to like not commit, environment variables or things like that. Like that's a part of like our safety checks. Is to not like publicize something that shouldn't be public. So that's another kind of consideration as we go further into this. And I think folks are taking it pretty seriously.
I have a question. It's slightly off topic, but not off topic, but it's more of a selfish question that I didn't know
Right.
was a thing until now. When you showed like the analytics, for example,
Mhm.
is the theory here that this could be a potential replacement for like Google Analytics on your website, or is this like something that you would have in comparison to it?
Yeah, I mean, well, we have two page views and one visitor, so we're
Mhm.
cranking. So we basically need to sell at this point. So the idea on this one is kind of interesting. So when you look at Google Analytics and you look at like the cookie banners and things like that, a lot of those have to be set up because it's a third party cookie. So like Google Analytics is not on your website, right? Like it's not at
Mhm.
all attached to your service. It's a third party that you have to call to, like call home to. The idea with this is you wouldn't have to have a cookie banner, especially in the States, it's not required. But like if you didn't want to have a cookie banner, but you still wanted to like be compliant and not, do anything harmful, of course, but like there's no third party cookie here. This is a first party cookie. The cookie that we
Interesting.
present is in this package that I just installed. Where did it go? So like this is where like I don't actually have to have a cookie banner because this is where analytics sits. And then I can actually like go through and see all the things that are going on.
So you're referencing like in Europe, for example, like GDPR and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like if I wanted
Interesting.
to, yeah. So like that's where a lot of GDPR, and this is not legal advice. Let's talk more about this offline, someone, if you have questions about this. But like the idea is maybe it's not a complete replacement, maybe it's a complement, maybe it is a replacement. Like it's kind of up to you, but like the idea is we don't want to make your website slow in any way. And just like having to like jam a bunch of cruft in for whatever it is. Maybe you do have to do a cookie banner for whatever reason, but we'll help you make it really fast because it'll be first party analytics, right? Like we'll make like it'll just reduce the cruft of things that you have to put in, and then it's just going to all like there's going to be no ad blocker loss, right? So like imagine if you have an ad blocker and you go to our cool site and I have an ad blocker, it's going to block that third party cookie, right? It's just going to block all third party cookies no matter what. So I'm going to lose like some heuristics about my user base, right? Because some of that's just gone to third party ad blockers,
That's
even though
right.
they already saw my site. So this is actually just like server data that flows through. So like, I don't know, it's just like maybe like a second source, maybe a first party source. I don't know, it's kind of up to other folks. I wouldn't tell anybody to like you have to use analytics to replace Google Analytics because a lot of historical data might be
No,
in
no.
Google Analytics, but maybe it's a migration point where you eventually get to Vercel and you can then move things around. Is where I would look at it. Good.
Yeah, my first experience with this was via Framer. When with
Hmm.
Framer they have like built-in analytics, so that's where my mind started going. Like, oh, is this comparable to it? It seems like it is. It almost
Hmm.
seems like there's even a little bit more, to be honest with you. So that's pretty interesting. I may kind of dive in deeper there. We have a question here, and we'll probably end on this one. Does V0 follow the best practices, and does it allow you to customize for personal and or organizational preferences?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, I maybe missed this earlier when I was kind of flying around trying to do a bunch of stuff, and I have a bunch of open tabs that, let me go back to here. There we go. So the idea is, does it follow best practices? So the answer to that is unequivocally yes. So what V0 is trained on underneath the hood is Next.js, right? So, and it's Next.js at the latest version. And what trained on means is it actually like takes in all of the documentation, it takes in code examples, it takes in pretty much everything that you want to look at for all of Next.js. And an example would be like, I'm on Pages Router and I want to go to App Router. Here's my Pages Router code. How do I get it to App Router? Drop it into V0, and it's going to give you the latest and greatest. Like, this is best practices for Next.js and for building these things. We lean heavily into Next.js, and we lean heavily into Tailwind and Shadcn because this is our expertise, right? Now, for organizational stuff, like, I'm not an expert on your organization. This is where like your expertise needs to come in. So here's where I kind of did this a little bit with like screenshots. You can do it with Figma, but the key, though, I think would be really useful is if I go into projects. And I can actually have a bunch of projects here. So if I go to this project, it already knows that this is my homepage, right? So I'm just clicking into this homepage that we just made. But what I can do, oh, there, it just loaded in. Whoa, this is our new one. Wow, this is cool. Because remember, we were doing a follow-on where it made things look cool.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the source of truth, right? And this, Danny, it's cool to know that this is what we look like. Maybe they just combined both our faces for this picture. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is this guy. So this is what this is now the source of truth. So if I want to go back to my project and I want to go to view project, what I'll do here is I'll just like start playing around with this. Is like, I want to make a contact form from this project or for this project. And what I'll do is inside of each of these, like the knowledge base for how this actually works is going to build inside of this project. And here's where the organizational expertise comes in. Let's see if I can do Cook mode. And what Cook mode will do is it's actually just going to like go ahead and write it for me. It's just going to go build everything and go as far as it possibly can to make it really, really good. It might take a second for this to run. So the best practices is yes. And then like the personal and organizational preferences, this is where you kind of have to do a little bit of like investing in the platform to know where things are and kind of like set it up for your own use cases. We're not just going to infer based on like your, what you're using, how it's going to work. So that's where like it will give you the option to like customize this to your own use case.
Is there, like, for example, in Cursor, like one of the best practices I constantly preach to people is like utilization of memory bank, where it's, you could say, hey, here's the flows, or hey, here's our color theme that we stick to in the building of this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a way to do that in V0 where it's like, here's a memory bank of like things that are very important to us for this project, instead of having to reference it every single time you do a prompt? Or is this like, hey, every prompt you make, you need to reference this?
Yeah, this is going to improve over time. Is that idea of like maybe a design system or kind of like whatever it might be. Here's where with V0 is like projects is kind of the first, like the first way to run this. And let's see that. Let me go ahead and like reset this and see if we can get this to run through. So here's our contact page. So like the idea is like maybe instead of like a black button, I want a purple button every time. Right now we're doing that on the project basis. Where this is going to go is you'll be able to have your design system. Like it'll be eventually a thing that we can like, that you'll say like, okay, my design system is whatever. And the idea is now like that will be available to you persistently. The idea is what I want to do that for to begin with is in projects. And I have Danny and Matt's homepage. And here's where I'm going to make my contact form look like this design motif and things like that. So there is a little bit of kind of like room to grow on that side for us. But then again, this is the idea of like, I'm already 80% faster than I was before. So like that next level of stuff is something that we're still working on to make it and perfecting it. So this isn't like, keep an eye on that space for sure, because this is definitely something that we're going to invest in. And we're over.
So, Stephen, to your question, both are yes. And so the secondary part that I threw the curveball in is not yet, but soon. And so that's good to know. All right, y'all. Looking at the number of people here, we're over 1,100, which is wild. So thank y'all for hanging out with us. You could have been anywhere in the world this fine Tuesday afternoon. You decided to hang out with us, so I appreciate that. Later on this week, we have the State of React Native live stream. That's going to be on Thursday. I have 2 people joining me where we can actually 3 people, joining me for the State of React Native. And that one in particular, I think it's going to be a really big one. We're going over the state of React Native survey, as well as some hot takes, best practices, and things like that. So if you're interested in React Native in any way, shape, or form, highly recommend checking that one out. It'll be on Thursday, same time, same place. And y'all, we will see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.